Hello, YouTube. Belief in poltergeists is widespread in modern Russian society. Poltergeist as a phenomenon or belief echoes spiritualism. Meaningful knocks on the walls, spontaneous rotation on the table, telekinesis, moving objects under the influence of thought, beliefs in goblins, beliefs in aliens, and so forth. At the same time, it is possible to note some differences from other modern phenomena. Poltergeist refers to complex, little-studied phenomena lying at the junction of such fields of knowledge as physics, psychology, chemistry, geology, biology, and some others, which requires the application of a systematic approach to its study within the framework of interdisciplinary research. The long history of scientific and semi-scientific research in the field of this phenomenon clearly shows that the efforts of separate, disparate expert groups are not enough to reveal and comprehend the nature of the noisy spirit. In addition, the transdisciplinarity of poltergeist phenomena requires high scientific erudition of researchers, the use of clear methodological base, and the use of a wide range of instrumentation. Otherwise, even fairly well-organized local studies of individual outbreaks will not bring significant results. It is obvious that any research can develop qualitatively only in a specially formed environment, which includes a set of specific scientific criteria and requirements, task statements, as well, or I should say mission statements, as well as a certain community of scientists representing various fields of knowledge, ready for a full-fledged scientific discussion on a given topic. If such an environment is not created, then the very process of research, primarily of unexplained, little-studied phenomena, loses all meaning and descends into ordinary, primitive amateurism. Unfortunately, this problem is largely applicable to poltergeist research. At the same time, the situation is further aggravated when individual expert groups pay more attention to mythological ideas about the poltergeist, unscientific principles of work, thereby multiplying mediocre and outdated ideas about this phenomenon. This was the statement of the Russian paranormal research organization Cosmopois, whose leader, Vadim Chernobrov, a scientist, an author, a researcher, I knew years ago. He was a very prolific personality and has produced a number of really fantastic books. Later in this video, I will describe the Cosmopois research in this area of the paranormal, but now I want to look at some other aspects, including historical. Year 1814, the Krumishsky District Court of the Simbirsk province decided to bring to the judgment of God the case of an invisible voice, unexplained knocks, throwing stones in the hut of the widow L.F. Razdyakova. In the winter of 1833, Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, the famous Russian poet and novelist, wrote the following in his diary. In one of the houses, subordinate to the court stables, the furniture began to move and jump on its own. This case was handed over to the authorities. Prince Dolgorukov had appointed an investigation. One of the officials invited the local priest, but during the prayer, the chairs and tables did not remain in place. A typical poltergeist took place there. This is how objects behave during this strange phenomenon. The word poltergeist translates as noisy spirit. A number of Russians have encountered this phenomenon. Science, as usual, throws up its hands and declares that it cannot yet give an explanation. The term poltergeist appeared about 300 years ago. It was coined by the German Berthold Gertzmann in 1713 when cabinets moved independently in his house for several weeks. Books and candlesticks flew about and dishes would break. People believe that these are the tricks of evil spirits or spirits of the dead. In Russia, people even came up with a name for the culprit of such incidents, Barabashka. And what does the science say? The official line is predictable. It's all quackery, staging, at best natural anomalies, infrasound, or just drafts. But the drafts are such that there is nothing really to say. Well, the scientists are 94% right. That's the opinion of the doctor of medicine and candidate of technical sciences, Professor Andrei Lee, one of the few who studied this mysterious phenomenon on a scientific basis. He created in the mid-1990s and for a decade provided the work of a special emergency service for poltergeists. And that's his opinion about the percentage of the correctness. A quarter of such situations are commonplace practical jokes, but some of them are natural phenomena. And only in 6% of the cases, the cause is real telekinesis. In 1988, Dr. Lee organized the scientific association Psychophysics, which was the first organization, according to him, of its type in the USSR, officially engaged in the study of psi phenomena. In 1991, he founded the L.L. Vasiliev Foundation for Parapsychology. Within the framework of this organization, the world's first museum of the history of parapsychology was created. In 1995, he organized that ambulance service to detect and deal with poltergeists. The purpose of their activity, said Andrei Lee, president of the Vasiliev Parapsychology Foundation, was to remove the veil of mysticism that still envelops a person's psychic abilities, help him or her discover them in himself or herself, and teach them how to use them safely. The Museum of the History of Russian Parapsychology was organized by him in Moscow in 1991 and really existed until 2001. By creating his own virtual museum, Dr. Lee's goal was to restore the history of the National Museum of Parapsychology from archival documents, tell about its uniqueness, phenomenal people, and take visitors to the halls of the museum. It was the only museum of parapsychology in the world where on a popular level, from a natural science perspective, such interesting phenomena as clairvoyance, telepathy, telekinesis, poltergeist, non-traditional methods of diagnostics and treatment, extrasensory perception, bioenergetics, biolocation, dowsing were described. These phenomena have captured the imagination of people for many centuries and aroused persistent interest. Professor Lee believes telekinesis is the cause of the poltergeist. Despite the resistance of official science, telekinesis was registered, detected at the instrumental level. The reason for it is the state of special brain activity. A person controlling his or her energy can move objects at a distance, hold them on the surface of his or her own body. Andrei Lee believes that poltergeist is the same telekinesis, only energy is released subconsciously, spontaneously. The person himself radiating this energy most often does not realize this. There are 4 types of poltergeist. The noise poltergeist is accompanied by sounds without visible sources, banging on doors and walls, creaking, scratching. With the motor poltergeist, objects move independently, fly around the room, fall, and collapse. Fire poltergeist is less common. During this phenomenon, flames suddenly flare up on clothing or books. Such a case was described by Stephen King in one of his books. The water poltergeist manifests itself in the form of jets of water arising in the air, puddles on the floor, and wet spots on the walls. There have been cases when streams of water fell on people out of nowhere. According to scientists, the cause of this phenomena is the specific brain activity of someone in the room of people with unconscious telekinesis abilities. Over the years of Professor Lee's service, starting in 1995, he and his assistants went on alarm calls, emergency calls, with their ambulance hundreds of times. Only 6 or 7 times did they manage to encounter a real poltergeist. Here's one such case. During their trips, a set of equipment called a poltergeist trap was used, which included 4 miniature video cameras. The video shows how the hostess housewife is washing dishes in the kitchen. The eldest son is in the same place. The youngest is sitting on the couch in the room and watching TV. Suddenly, a bright spot appears behind the body, quickly growing into flames dancing on the wallpaper. The child jumps up and goes to the kitchen for help. In the next episode, recorded on film, mother and son approach the fire and extinguish the flames. There is no particular panic in their actions. It seems that such events are not new to them. According to Andrei Lee, it is the youngest child who spontaneously creates high temperature focus around himself due to his telekinesis abilities. One of them appeared in the thickness of the concrete wall behind the sofa, and the wallpaper that fell into this area burst into flames. Imagine the hidden energy potential inherent in a person. Or do you still think that this is fiction? Over the years of their work, experts have compiled a classification of the phenomenon. Again, poltergeists can be fire, sound, motor, and water. Hundreds of Russian citizens' appeals were accepted and checked by this group. The vast majority turned out to be fakes. These were either people's fantasies or ordinary practical jokes or cases explained by natural causes. As, for example, in a high-rise building near the Savelovsky railway station where dishes rattled in the cupboards, utensils fell from the shelves. It turned out that the objects were moving due to imperceptible vibrations of the wall adjacent to the arch where the wind is constantly blowing. However, several times over the years of operation of the ambulance, the experts had to throw up their hands. There was no explanation for the devilry. So in the city of Kolomna, right before their eyes, an apartment burned down from poltergeist. And if one source of ignition was found inside the upholstery of the sofa, then the other turned out to be inside the concrete wall where there was no electrical wiring. Years passed, and a major Russian newspaper had to call the poltergeist ambulance service for a personal matter. It was suspected that the ghost had chosen the editorial building, this historic Baryshnikov estate on Myasnitskaya. I know the newspaper name, but it's not important here. In August 2015, a surveillance camera recorded a glowing spherical object flying erratically in the courtyard. Another time, the security service videotaped a mysterious ball that hovered, then froze in space, and then with great speed crossed the courtyard in a straight line and flew into the window on the second floor. the janitor for this editorial office, who was lucky enough to observe this phenomenon, so to say, immediately quit. Andrei Lee believes that the phenomenon of the noisy spirit is inseparable from its bearer. Researchers call such a person a focal face. Unknowingly, by the power of his biofield, he is able to influence objects, moving them and causing fires. This is the specific activity of his or her brain. This is how the negative energy driven inside, say because of family troubles, manifests itself. Andrei Lee's group has even developed a methodology for how to convert a fire poltergeist into a safer motor one. The researcher, he has other instances and evidence of pyrokinesis. However, stage telekinesis is most common, according to him. And here's one case in the south of Moscow. The picture fully corresponds to the description of spontaneous telekinesis. Books were thrown off the shelves, shards in the hallway, porridge on the floor, an overturned saucepan, and a broken alarm clock. But the dog behaves calmly, and with real poltergeists, pets are very nervous, whining, rushing around the apartment. It turned out that the staging was staged by an 8-year-old boy who lacked the attention of his parents. But is telekinesis the only reason for the appearance of a poltergeist? Perhaps these are the workings of a goblin? Well, now the capital's poltergeist ambulance service is not in service. He got involved in other scientific projects, admitted Dr. Lee. And there are a lot of problems in the country, no time for barabashkas. As soon as the crisis began, the poltergeist ambulance received fewer calls. Apparently people had more serious problems. They paid less attention to the manifestations of the poltergeist. So that service is no longer working. Although I understand that Dr. Lee has some younger followers, but it's his research that I wanted to bring to your attention because it was unique in a number of ways. By the way, in 2018, people in Russia were discussing the mysterious events in the Tomsk region. There were books flying in one of the houses, cabinets falling down. The police arriving at the scene threw up their hands. There was no rational explanation for what was happening. But no one apparently is studying this phenomenon in the country, in the Russian Federation now. Not reacting to it, but really studying it. But, as we know now, there was that ambulance once in Russia, and it's no more as it was revealed by Professor Lee in 2015. But let's look at some of the statements of ordinary Russians about this phenomenon. Just a few, but I think interesting. This person saw with his own eyes how the pen stand hanging on the wall swung like a pendulum for about half an hour in the house with the doors and windows closed. And it was more than once. Another testimony, at work, the batteries, 2 pieces, lying on the shelf to be used for a computer mouse, suddenly flew off the shelf where they lay one after another at a distance of about half a meter. That's how far they flew off. They flew like shells and rolled on the carpet. Eyewitnesses were stunned. They tried to throw the batteries themselves, but it turned out that the batteries could not roll on the carpet, which is interesting. Another testimony, Cit of Chelyabinsk in the Urals. In the 1980s, things began to fly in a private house. Of course, a crowd gathered. The city authorities sent the police over to disperse the crowd, and see what's going on there. Apparently, there was a flying sofa reported. Then it all fell silent, and the grandchildren were declared to be the guilty the culprits, and the priests who came to the area were forced to remain silent. Another person noted that, interestingly, poltergeists very rarely cause injuries to people but damage furniture, items, and household appliances. This person stated that a friend, after the renovation, moved into the old apartment in the city center. Well, often at night, the soap dispenser worked in the kitchen and clicked until morning. Everything went away when the mirror left over from the previous tenants was cut out from the wall. It was mounted in the bathroom wall and left during the renovation. Now, there was another poltergeist research group in Russia. I already mentioned them. It could be they're still in existence. The Cosmopois Research Association has not lost interest in the phenomenon and has even created a special sector for its study. So in the beginning of this video, I told you how they would approach the research, and they did. Over the past 5 years, they have recorded about 50 poltergeist outbreaks in Russia and the Commonwealth of Independent States countries, CIS in short, said Nikita Tomin, head of the sector, in the year 2018. So from 2013 to 2018. Experts visited the sites of abnormal events 28 times, and in 7 cases they found the phenomenon in the active phase. By the way, the average duration of a typical poltergeist, when the dates of the occurrence and the end of the occurrence are known, is 17 days. In the autumn of 2014, Cosmopois studied the fire poltergeist in the Ramenskaya district of the Moscow region. 2 country houses burned down. Their owners had previously extinguished spontaneous fires and even sprinkled these places with holy water. Often at night, heavy footsteps and the rumble of cans could be heard from the attic. However, there was no one in the house except the owners. They're sure of that. On October 18, the buildings finally burned down from another mystical explosion. After the fire, they tried to rebuild one house, but on the first day, a worker from the construction team broke his ribs. So the rest of the workers immediately retreated. To them, the place was cursed. They examined the ashes with the help of equipment, a microphone, a pyrometer, a thermal imager. The last 2 are devices for the remote temperature measurement. According to Vadim Chernobrov, coordinator, leader of Cosmopois, who passed away in 2017, it looks like there is a tectonic fault running underground. Gases contained in the Earth crust can rise to the surface and affect the central nervous system and the human psyche. And over time, such exposure can lead to spontaneous temperature rise and fires near this person. A curious case was studied by the Ukrainian branch of the Cosmopois. For more than 6 months, an unknown abnormal element haunted family from Zhytomyr. With the arrival of the mother-in-law, knocks and rustles began to be heard in the apartment. Heavy objects fell down. Then the fire started, so they had to call the fire department. But even after that, Barabashka did not leave the owners alone. Water regularly pours out of the head of on the head of the family, as if from nowhere. They're referring to the husband. It is logical to assume that the reason for the poltergeist was the difficult relationship between the son-in-law and mother-in-law. Among other cities where noisy spirits have been frolicking lately, I guess that would be by about mid-2015, 2014, and so forth. Kirov, Irkutsk, Perm. Moreover, everywhere when making measurements, experts noted high indicators of the electromagnetic field, EMF. This correlates with the hypothesis put forward by many researchers, including foreign ones. The poltergeist feeds on EMF energy. For example, it has been observed that the Barabashka wakes up when geomagnetic activity increases, and that in turn is associated with geomagnetic storms that occur after powerful solar flares. Hence, the conclusion Barabushka is not scary, it is sunny, of the sun. Here's how it started with Cosmopois. In mid-2009, within the framework of the All-Russian Scientific Research Public Association Cosmopois, a special directorate, sector, for the study of poltergeist was created. The main purpose of this sector or unit was the coordinated scientific research of this phenomenon in the vast territory of the post-Soviet space. The work was based on the tasks of operational monitoring of poltergeist outbreaks in Russia and the CIS countries, the formation and use of mobile expert groups on the ground, followed by a general discussion of each specific case within the framework of special seminars. Simultaneously with the study of the current poltergeist activity, the sector began to develop methods and approaches for investigating this phenomenon, forming a database of outbreaks of the noisy spirit and working out hypothesis theories to explain the individual mechanisms of the poltergeist process. A number of reports have been prepared and published, both on the results of each episode that came to the attention of research groups and with the generalization of several similar manifestations of poltergeist activity. Over the 5 years of research, the experts of the sector had faced various difficulties and problems, including those outlined above, but at the same time they managed to organize and continue unique coordinated research in the field of the phenomenon under study. Here's some information from their 5-year plan research. The anomalous phenomenon that we now refer to as poltergeist have occurred in the history of mankind since time immemorial. Some of the first such evidence is recorded on clay tablets of the famous Library of Babylon. It says that the spirits penetrate from one house to another, and it is impossible to keep them out of doors. You can't lock them up. They crawl through the doors like snakes. They prevent a wife from conceiving from her husband. They steal children from a man's hands. They drive babies out of their stepfather's houses. But the official birth of the term poltergeist, from poltern, to make noise, knock, rage, and geist, spirit, genius, ghost, happened only in Germany. It happened in Germany. In 1713, Dr. Bertolt Gertzmann, a resident of the German town of Dortmund, first used this word to describe abnormal manifestations of an unknown element in his house. Cabinets spontaneously moved, books and candlesticks flew about, dishes broke, etc. Like I said before, he only became the author. He also became the author of the first detailed research report, Accurate and Truthful Representation of Ghosts and Poltergeists in Dortmund, thereby laying down the general principles of studying this phenomenon. More serious systematic studies of the phenomenon of the noisy spirit began in England after 1882 in the connection with the creation of Society for Psychic Research. In Russia, the poltergeist phenomenon began to be studied much later. Until 1917, the antics of the noisy spirit were considered purely in animistic way, along with the mediumistic phenomenon. Here is something interesting. In 1932 to 1937, in the interests of and on the instructions of the People's Commissariat of Defense of the USSR, research was underway to clarify the physical nature of telepathy in the laboratory of biophysics of the USSR Academy of Sciences in Moscow under the guidance of Professor Turligin. Did they also study poltergeist? We do not know. Only since the beginnings of the 1980s, basically, in the USSR, the phenomenon begins to enter the plane of scientific research thanks to the works of Ziegel, Fomenko, Mirzalis, Vinokurov, Lee, Novgorodov, Isakov, etc. The main peak of such research occurred in the late 1980s, 1990s, when mobile expert groups led by Novgorodov in Tomsk, Isakov in Moscow, and Lee in Moscow operated. Their practical research has made the most significant contribution to the development of the methodological base in the study of poltergeist in the Russian-speaking environment. The adequate dissemination of the results of these studies was facilitated by the specialized journal Parapsychology and Psychophysics, published by L.L. Vasiliev Foundation for Parapsychology. Isakov's group developed hypothesis of momentary contact or instantaneous contact and induced hypnosis, which suggests that the eyewitness of a poltergeist is introduced in a special way into hypnotic state, after which one of the participants performs certain impulsive actions perceived by hypnotized persons as abnormal spontaneous events. Isakov claimed that their team succeeded in the laboratory conditions to simulate this kind of hypnotic poltergeist. One of the significant achievements of the Lee's groups was the development of a technique for transferring poltergeist energy from the most dangerous fiery phase to the phase of motor manifestations. In addition, Moscow researchers were among the first to formulate a methodological formulation of the problem using technical and instrumentation tools to study the phenomenon. That's important. The basic work for Russian-speaking researchers was the book by N.S. Novgorodov titled Poltergeist Research in Siberia, in which the author was able to accumulate not only the achievements of post-Soviet researchers, but also analyze the experience of foreign scientists in this field. Among other things, Novgorodov proposed to reduce a huge array of hypotheses about the nature of the poltergeist into a single community differentiated by two characteristics, width and depth. At the same time, the level of depth is understood as an attitude to a psychophysical problem. The breadth of coverage means allowing or not allowing the manifestations of alien intelligence in poltergeists. Thus, at the present stage of research, Occam's razor has cut off all possible animistic and demonological interpretations of the phenomenon, thereby eliminating the assumption of interference by some non-human mind in the poltergeist process. Despite this, many major experts in the field of poltergeist, such as Scott, Rogo, Bender, Novgorodov, and so forth, believe that the forms and style of manifestation of poltergeists revealed to date, their features indicate that ignoring mythological interpretations of the phenomenon reduces the chances of explaining the nature of the noisy spirit. Throughout the scientific process of researching the poltergeist phenomenon, attempts have not stopped to develop criteria that allow identifying a single case as reliable with a sufficient degree of reliability. Among other things, uncharacteristic damage to objects can help in this, indicating that they have been exposed to influences of an unknown nature. And if the very nature of such an impact has not yet been established, then by the nature of the damage it can be concluded that things were in the field of action of the poltergeist environment, and the case itself is not staged residence. Cosmopois' team has studied various poltergeist artifacts, damaged glasses seized for analysis from poltergeist apartments in Gomel, Kirov, Omsk, and other cities. The study was conducted on the basis of state enterprise, the Belarusian Scientific Research Geological Exploration Institute, as well as by two ballistic specialists. Most of the fragments were examined that were examined were completely smooth to the touch, sometimes as if melted. In other cases, they had polished edges. Such damages were found in other apartments in various CIS countries. However, attempts to reproduce this phenomenon and simulate these microflusions in the laboratory have never been successful. Electromagnetic poltergeist pattern. One of the most important tasks in this, or goals in the study of poltergeist, is to clarify the nature of the forces that produce poltergeist movements. Modern poltergeist research indicates that poltergeist forces are likely to be electromagnetic in nature. In this regard, it is assumed that anomalies in the intensity of electromagnetic fields are present on poltergeist objects, or some special field structure is manifested. For 5 years, various expert groups in the sector had been measuring electromagnetic fields in many restless apartments and premises in order to detect electromagnetic patterns characteristic of poltergeist activity. The results obtained, as well as the generalization of the experience of domestic and foreign researchers, made it possible to outline the main contours of the electromagnetic poltergeist pattern. As a result, the following can be distinguished. 1. The phenomenon of poltergeist is often accompanied by a malfunction of the electrical appliances. Deviations in the values of the electromagnetic field are recorded during measurements. 2. According to laboratory studies, certain categories of ultra-low fields, experienced induced fields, EIF, can affect certain areas of the human brain, primarily the temporal lobe, thereby causing specific hallucinations with ghost visions. EIF refers to magnetic fields of moderate intensity of extremely low frequencies, which have a complex structure of oscillations over time. In places of poltergeist activity, increases in magnetic induction values are most often recorded in the region of extremely low frequencies. The dates of poltergeist episodes correlate with the index of geomagnetic activity. The Earth's geomagnetic field during magnetic storms, thunderstorms, can change significantly. Poltergeist cases almost always occur on the day of shortly before a spike in geomagnetic activity. 4. Poltergeists can also be detected by changes in the intensity of a weak high-frequency electromagnetic field. 5. When a focal phase appears or on days of active manifestations, the general background of the electromagnetic field intensity in the room, primarily in the area of ultra-high frequencies, may increase several times, 2 to 5 times. Now here's another interesting statement, and not from Cosmopois. Vladimir Volchenko, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Professor of Bauman Moscow State Technical University, said that poltergeist effects can be explained by the theory of stray shielding points of standing electromagnetic and gravitational waves in the range of ultra-high frequency currents. A poltergeist is nothing more than a demonstration of the power of a beam electromagnetic gravitational weapon of nature. We presumptuously consider ourselves the masters of nature, but in fact, we only timidly learn its basics. There are many phenomena in the world whose physics is not yet clear to us. As you can see, the civilian research in Russia of this phenomenon and other psi phenomenon continues in one form or another. Well, at least the Cosmopois is still out there. As to the military research, I have no doubt that it exists in major world powers and regional powers, but we really know nothing about it, nor do we want to know, I guess. So that's what I wanted to let you know today. And if you like my research, please kindly support me through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please like my videos. Please subscribe to my channel.